Have you ever felt like the world around you was falling apart? Have you known that feeling of being completely overwhelmed, as if the ground beneath your feet has given way? Life can sometimes feel like a relentless storm, where the winds of change blow hard against us, and the waves of uncertainty threaten to pull us under. One moment, the sun is shining, the path is clear, and our hearts are filled with a sense of security. We believe we have everything under control. We think we know where we're going. The future seems like a calm and predictable sea stretching out before us invitingly. But then, without warning, the skies begin to darken. A sudden phone call brings difficult news. A relationship we cherish begins to fracture. A job we depended on is suddenly gone. These are the storms of life, the moments that arrive uninvited and leave us feeling small and powerless. The chaos can be deafening, a roaring in our ears that drowns out all sense of hope. Fear tightens its grip around our hearts and we struggle to breathe. It is in these moments that we feel most alone, tossed about by circumstances far beyond our ability to manage or contain. This feeling of losing control is a deeply human experience. We spend so much of our lives building foundations, creating routines, planning for the future. We want to believe that our efforts can protect us from the unpredictable nature of the world. Yet, the storms still come. They remind us of our own fragility. They expose our deepest anxieties and force us to confront the question of what we truly trust in. When our plans crumble and our strength fails, where do we turn? Who do we call out to in the darkness? This is a story about a storm, but it is not just a story about wind and waves. It is a story about our own storms, the ones that rage within our hearts and minds. It is about the overwhelming fear that can consume us when everything feels lost. It is about the desperate search for a solid rock in the middle of a raging sea. It is a story that invites us to look at our own lives, at the moments when we have felt most afraid and most alone, and to ask ourselves if there might be a different way to face the tempest that life inevitably brings our way. The day was drawing to a close. A soft, golden light spread across the landscape, painting the hills and the sea in warm, gentle colors. Jesus had been teaching the crowds all day, his words flowing like a river of life, touching the hearts of all who listened. Now, as the people began to disperse, heading back to their homes with minds full of wonder, he turned to his closest friends, his disciples. He looked at them with a quiet invitation in his eyes. "Let us go over to the other side," he said. His voice was calm, yet it held a sense of purpose. They were eager to follow without question. They left the crowds behind and walked toward the shore of the Sea of Galilee. The air was still and warm. A small fishing boat, weathered by many journeys, rested gently at the water's edge. The disciples, many of whom were fishermen themselves, moved with familiar ease. They untied the ropes and pushed the boat into the calm, glassy water. There was a sense of simple routine in their actions, a comfortable rhythm to their work. They were embarking on a journey they had made many times before, a simple crossing from one side of the lake to the other. As the boat drifted away from the land, a profound sense of peace settled over them. The sounds of the shore faded into a soft murmur, replaced by the gentle lapping of water against the wooden hull. The setting sun cast a long, shimmering path of light across the sea, a golden road leading them onward. Some of the disciples took up the oars, their movements synchronized and steady, while others found places to sit, their faces turned toward the fading light. They spoke in low, peaceful tones, perhaps talking about the day's teachings or the simple things of life. The world felt safe, orderly, and full of quiet promise. Jesus found a place to rest in the stern of the boat. He lay his head on a cushion, the day's long work complete. The gentle rocking of the vessel was like a lullaby, and soon he was asleep. His presence brought a deep feeling of security to the disciples. With him near, what was there to fear? He was their teacher, their guide, their anchor. His calm was infectious, spreading through the small boat and making the journey feel like a peaceful retreat from the demands of the world. They were together. They were safe. And the sea was a friend, carrying them gently toward their destination. The boat glided smoothly through the water as twilight deepened into night. The last sliver of the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in shades of deep purple and indigo. Stars began to appear, one by one, like tiny diamonds scattered across a dark velvet cloth. The moon rose, casting a soft, silvery glow upon the surface of the sea. The air grew cooler and a gentle breeze whispered through the sail, helping to push them along on their quiet voyage. Peter might have been telling a story of a great catch, his voice full of a fisherman's pride. John, ever watchful, might have been gazing at the stars, pondering the vastness of God's creation. Andrew was likely checking the ropes and the nets, his hands moving with practiced skill. James was likely checking the ropes and the nets, his hands moving with practiced skill. There was a brotherhood among them, a bond forged through shared experiences and a common mission. In these quiet moments, their trust in each other and in their master felt as solid and dependable as the boat beneath them. Everything felt right. But the Sea of Galilee is known for its deceptive nature. Its location, nestled low among the surrounding hills, makes it vulnerable to sudden, violent shifts in weather. A cool wind can rush down from the mountains and collide with the warm, moist air over the water, creating a tempest with shocking speed. The disciples, seasoned as they were, knew this. Yet, on this beautiful, tranquil night, such a possibility felt distant and unreal. The calm was so complete, so absolute, that it lulled them into a state of perfect contentment. They were unaware that the gentle whispers of the sea were about to turn into a furious roar. Without any warning, the gentle character of the night began to shift. It started subtly, a change so small that at first it was barely noticeable. The soft, whispering breeze that had been their companion suddenly grew colder and carried a different tone. It was no longer a gentle push but a sharp, insistent nudge against the sail. The steady rhythmic lapping of water against the boat's hull was interrupted by a sudden choppy slap. One of the disciples, perhaps Andrew, with his fisherman's senses, would have been the first to notice. He might have lifted his head, sniffing the air, his brow furrowed with a flicker of concern. The stars, which had been so clear just moments before, began to disappear behind a thin, fast-moving veil of clouds. The quiet conversations faltered and then stopped altogether as more of the men became aware of the shifting atmosphere. They looked at each other, a silent question passing between them. They scanned the horizon, but the darkness was now absolute, swallowing the distant shoreline and the silvery path of the moon. The water, once a sheet of dark glass, began to stir restlessly. Small waves like nervous wrinkles appeared on its surface, growing larger and more agitated with each passing moment. The boat, which had glided so smoothly, began to rock with a new, unsettling motion. The disciples instinctively moved to their posts. Years of experience on these waters had taught them that the Sea of Galilee could be a treacherous and unpredictable foe. They began to furl the sail, their hands moving quickly to secure the flapping canvas before the wind could tear it. Others grabbed the oars, attempting to keep the boat's bow pointed into the oncoming swells to prevent it from being turned sideways and swamped. A sense of urgency replaced the calm of moments before. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. The first distant rumble of thunder echoed from the mountains, a low guttural growl that promised a more violent display to come. Fear, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of their composure. These were not novices. They were hardened fishermen who knew the sea in all its moods. They had weathered storms before, but there was something different about this one. The speed with which it descended felt unnatural, malevolent. The storm did not build, it exploded. The distant rumble of thunder became a deafening, continuous crash that seemed to split the sky right above their heads. Blinding flashes of lightning revealed a world of pure chaos. In those brief, ghostly white moments they could see the waves, which were no longer mere swells but monstrous, churning mountains of black water. The waves rose up around them, their crests frothing with white foam like the snarling teeth of a wild beast. The wind howled with a shrieking, demonic voice tearing at them, trying to rip the oars from their hands and the very breath from their lungs. The sky and the sea merged into one violent, swirling vortex of fury. The small wooden boat, which had seemed so sturdy and reliable on the calm sea, was now terrifyingly fragile. It was tossed about like a child's toy, lifted to the dizzying height of a wave's peak one moment, then plunged into a deep, watery trough the next. Cold, salty spray turned into solid sheets of water that crashed over the sides, drenching the men and quickly filling the bottom of the boat. The wood groaned and creaked under the immense pressure, every joint straining against the relentless assault. The disciples bailed furiously, their movements frantic and desperate, but for every bucket of water they threw out, two more seemed to surge in, cold and heavy around their ankles. Panic began to set in, a cold dread that was far more chilling than the wind and the water. Their experience, their strength, their knowledge of the sea. It all meant nothing in the face of such overwhelming power. They were completely at the mercy of a tempest that seemed intent on their destruction. Cries of alarm and shouts of instruction were swallowed by the roar of the storm, making each man feel utterly alone in the struggle. They were fighting a losing battle, and the grim realization was dawning on their faces, visible in the stark flashes of lightning. They were sinking, the sea was claiming them, their journey was ending here, in a dark, watery grave. In the midst of this terror, their human strength began to fail. Their arms ached from bailing and rowing, their muscles burning with exhaustion. The cold seeped into their bones, and their hope began to drain away with the water they could not stop. Every crash of a wave against the hull felt like a final, fatal blow. The boat was no longer a vessel of passage, but their coffin. The end felt not just possible, but certain. As the storm raged with unrelenting fury, dark towering waves thrashed the boat, the splintering of wood, a sharp, terrifying crack. One of the men screamed as a massive wave slammed the side. The loud crack echoed through the hull. Their last bastion of safety began to break apart. Hope, already dwindling, now seemed to shatter. The disciples looked at each other with wide, terrified eyes. The creaking and groaning became a death rattle. The vessel was being torn to pieces around them. The water inside was past their ankles, swirling around their knees with every lurch. Harder to stand, harder to bail, harder to do anything but hold on. The physical struggle was immense. The internal struggle was even greater. All their years of faith, all the miracles they had witnessed, all the teachings they had heard from their master, it all seemed to vanish. Fragmented prayers, desperate shouts into the wind, doubt flooded their souls. Where was he? Jesus. He was in the stern, asleep. Asleep. How could anyone sleep through this? Shock, then disbelief. How could he be so calm? Fear, confusion, a touch of anger. Did he not care that they were perishing? The contrast was staggering. Outside, hurricane chaos. Inside the boat, a frantic struggle for survival. And in the stern, a man sleeping in perfect peace. This image burned into them. It was the breaking point. Their strength was gone. The boat failing. Hope, a dying ember. They had to wake him. They had to confront him. They had to make him see the death that was staring them in the face. Finally, their terror gave way to a single, desperate purpose. They stumbled and scrambled to Ratsansat through the swamping boat, fighting the lurching deck, the rising water, to get to the stern. They were no longer just a crew of fishermen. They were a frantic mob of terrified men, their faces pale and streaked with rain and sea spray. The lightning flashes revealed eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. All their training, all their experience on the water had been rendered useless. They were at the end of their own strength, staring into the abyss of the storm, and their only remaining hope was the man who was inexplicably, impossibly asleep. Their composure was completely shattered. They reached him, their hands shaking as they grabbed his shoulders to wake him. Their voices were ragged shouts, barely audible above the howling wind and the crashing waves. "Master, Master, wake up! Do you not care that we are perishing?" It was a question born from the deepest part of their fear. It was more than just a plea for help. It was an accusation. It was the cry of a heart that feels abandoned in its darkest hour. The doubt that had been creeping into their minds was now spoken aloud. A painful, desperate challenge thrown at the one they had chosen to follow. Think of their state of mind in that moment. They were surrounded by utter chaos, the world a violent blur of black water and blinding light. Their boat, their only refuge, was breaking apart beneath them. Death was not a distant possibility. It was an immediate, tangible presence, reaching for them with every wave that crashed over the side. Their cry echoes through the ages, for it is a cry we all have uttered in our own storms. When a diagnosis is given, when a relationship ends, when our plans collapse into ruin, we too have looked to heaven and asked, "Do you not care?" It is the most human of questions, the doubt that surfaces when our faith is pushed to its absolute limit. The disciples, in their raw and unfiltered terror, were not just speaking for themselves, they were giving voice to the fear and doubt that resides in every human heart when the waves of life threaten to overwhelm us and God seems silent and far away. Well, their cry is ours too. When their frantic cries finally roused him, he did not wake with a start. There was no panic in his eyes, no sudden jolt of alarm. He opened his eyes and looked at them, and in his gaze, there was a deep and sorrowful calm. He saw their terror, he saw their doubt, he saw the storm, not just on the sea, but the one that was raging within their hearts. He heard their desperate, accusatory question, and he did not rebuke them in anger. Instead, he absorbed their fear into his own profound peace. He looked past their panicked faces for a moment, out at the raging tempest. He saw the same monstrous waves they saw. He felt the same violent wind that chilled them to the bone. He was in the same breaking boat, in the same life-threatening situation. But he saw it all through different eyes, where they saw an unstoppable force of destruction. He saw a created thing that was subject to its creator, where they saw the end of all hope. He saw an opportunity to reveal a deeper truth about who he was and the nature of the kingdom he proclaimed. His perspective was not limited by the immediate danger. Before he addressed the storm, he first looked at the state of their hearts. His silence in that moment was a gentle question in itself. Why were they so afraid? After all they had seen, after all the time they had spent with him, why was their faith so small? His calm presence was a quiet challenge to their worldview. It invited them to consider that perhaps the storm was not the most powerful thing in the boat. It suggested that their fear, while understandable, was based on a misunderstanding of reality. The true power was not in the wind or the waves, but in the one who was now awake and sitting quietly among them. Jesus slowly rose to his feet. In the midst of the violently pitching boat, his balance was perfect, his stance unshakable. The wind tore at his robes and whipped his hair across his face, but he stood as if rooted to the very foundations of the earth. The disciples, clinging to the sides of the failing vessel, watched him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. What was he going to do? Was he going to help them bail the water? Was he going to take an oar and fight the waves alongside them? His stillness was a stark contrast to their frantic, panicked movements. He did not seem to be preparing for a physical battle. Instead, he simply stood, a figure of profound authority in the heart of the chaos. He lifted his head and looked out not at the disciples, but at the storm itself. He faced the shrieking wind and the monstrous churning waves as one would face a disobedient child. There was no fear in his eyes, only a commanding presence that seemed to fill the entire space. The disciples fell silent, their desperate cries dying in their throats. Then, he spoke. His voice was not a shout to be heard over the roar of the storm. It was calm, clear, and filled with an undeniable power that cut through the noise of the wind and waves. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of the universe.
Peace, be still.
It was not a request, it was not a prayer, it was a decree, issued from the highest authority. The words hung in the air for a fraction of a second, imbued with the same creative power that first spoke light into existence. For an instant, nothing happened. The wind still howled, the waves still crashed, but then it was as if the storm itself heard and recognized the voice of its master. The disciples felt it before they saw it. The crushing force of the wind against their faces suddenly eased. The violent, bone-jarring lurching of the boat began to soften. It was a moment suspended between two realities, the terrifying chaos that had been their world just seconds before, and the impossible peace that was now descending upon them. They held their breath, their hearts caught between utter disbelief and a dawning, unimaginable awe. The command had been given, and creation was beginning to obey. The change was instantaneous and absolute. It was not a gradual calming, like a storm slowly losing its energy. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The howling wind that had been screaming in their ears simply stopped. One moment it was a deafening roar, and the next, a profound, total silence. The monstrous waves, towering like mountains, collapsed. They did not just shrink, they flattened completely. The sea, once churning and frothing, became as smooth and calm as a sheet of dark glass, reflecting faint light, breaking through scattering clouds. The storm did not pass. It vanished. Silence deeper than any they had known settled over the water. The only sound, gentle lapping against the now steady boat and the dripping of the last rain from the rigging. The air, thick with spray and electric charge moments before, became clear and still. The disciples stood frozen, hands gripping the sides of the boat, knuckles white. They looked at the placid water, the clearing sky, and then back to Jesus, calm in their midst. The sudden tranquility was almost as shocking as the storm's fury. Unnatural, impossible, utterly miraculous. The fear that had gripped them moments before was replaced by a new, more terrifying feeling. Awe. Not the fear of drowning, but the fear of being in the presence of incomprehensible power. They had seen him heal the sick and teach with authority, but this was something else, entirely. This was power over the very fabric of creation. They had been afraid of the storm, now they were afraid of the man who could stop it with a word. They looked at each other, eyes wide, a question unspoken. Who is this man that even wind and waves obey him? Jesus lowered his hand and turned his gaze to them. The profound peace on the water was reflected in his eyes. His question hung in the silent air, gentle yet piercing.
Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?
The rebuke was soft but landed with the weight of the miracle. He was not scolding their natural fear, but their failure to trust the one with them in the boat. The outward storm had been stilled. His question pointed to the storm of doubt in their hearts. They sat stunned, left to think. The story of that night on the Sea of Galilee is more than just a historical account of a miracle. It is a mirror, reflecting the landscape of our own lives. We all have our own storms, do we not? They may not involve howling winds or crashing waves, but they are storms nonetheless. The sudden diagnoses that darken our skies, the unexpected job losses that pull the ground from under our feet, the painful fractures in relationships that leave us feeling adrift and alone. These are the tempests of the heart. In these personal storms, we are the disciples in the boat. We are often experienced, capable, and resourceful in our own right. We try to manage the situation with our own strength and knowledge. We bail the water. We fight the waves. We do everything we can to keep our small vessel from sinking. We rely on our own understanding and our own power to navigate the crisis. But there comes a point in every significant storm when we realize our own efforts are not enough. The waves of anxiety are too high. The winds of adversity are too strong. We feel our hope beginning to fail, leaving us exhausted and terrified. It is in that moment of desperation, when our own strength is exhausted, that we often cry out. Just like the disciples, our prayers can become a mixture of faith and fear, a desperate plea for help that is tinged with the accusation, "Do you not care that I am perishing?" We look at our circumstances. God can seem distant, silent, even asleep. We wonder why he doesn't intervene immediately, why he allows the storm to rage when it would be so simple for him to calm it. This is a profound and painful part of the human experience of faith. The struggle to believe in a caring God in the middle of what feels like uncaring chaos. This story validates that feeling. It shows us that even the Lord's closest followers, men who had witnessed countless miracles, were filled with fear and doubt when the storm was at its peak. Their fear was real, and Jesus did not dismiss it. He met them right there, in their terror and their weakness. This gives us permission to be honest about our own fears. It reminds us that God is not afraid of our questions or our doubts. He is not offended by our desperate cries. He simply invites us, even in our fear, to turn our eyes toward Him, the one who is with us in the boat. The true lesson of the storm is not that followers of Jesus will never face trouble. On the contrary, He led them directly into the storm. The lesson is about where we place our focus and our trust when the trouble comes. The disciples were focused on the wind. The disciples were focused on the waves, and so they were filled with fear. Jesus was focused on the Father, and so he was filled with peace. The storm was the same for all of them. Their experience of it was completely different. Peace is not the absence of storms. Peace is the presence of God in the midst of them, a calm that can exist even when chaos reigns all around us. This peace comes from a faith that grows beyond what we can see and feel. Faith is the anchor of the soul. Anchor close up. It does its most important work when unseen, holding a ship steady against the pull of the wind and the current. Faith is not about denying the reality of the storm. The waves are real. The danger is real. Faith is about holding on to a deeper reality, the reality of God's presence, His power, His love for us. It is believing that even when we are being tossed about, our anchor is firmly planted in something unshakable, in the character of God Himself. The awe the disciples felt after the storm was stilled is a crucial part of the story. Their fear of the storm was replaced by a reverent fear of the one who commands the storm. This reveals a vital shift in perspective. They began to understand that the power of God was far greater than the power of their circumstances. The question, "Who is this?" is the beginning of a deeper, more mature faith. It is a faith that is built not on the expectation of a life free from storms, but on the knowledge of who is with us in the boat. It moves from asking God to fix our problems, to simply worshiping the God who is bigger than our problems. Therefore, this story is an open invitation for us today. When the storms of life begin to rage, when fear and doubt threaten to sink us, we have a choice. We can focus on the wind and the waves, allowing them to fill us with terror. Or we can look for the one who is with us in the boat. We can cry out to him, not in accusation, but in desperation and dependence. And we can listen for his voice, the voice that still speaks with absolute authority, commanding the storms within us. Peace, be still. That voice still has the power to bring a great and sudden calm to our frightened hearts. Closing the story is not about ending a narrative. It is about beginning or continuing a journey of faith. The disciples did not reach the shore that night and find that their lives were forever free of storms. There would be other trials, other fears, and other moments of doubt. But they were changed by what they had witnessed. They carried with them the profound knowledge of who was traveling with them. Their faith, though tested and sometimes faltering, now had a new and unshakable reference point. They now knew, in a way they never had before, that the man they followed held power over the very elements of creation. This is the path we are invited to walk as well. Our journey with God is not a single dramatic event but a continuous process of learning to trust Him more deeply. Each storm we face becomes an opportunity for our faith to grow, for our roots to go down deeper into the soil of His faithfulness. When we look back on the storms we have already weathered, we can see the moments where His peace sustained us, where His strength carried us, even when we felt we were sinking. These memories become the building blocks of a resilient and mature faith, one that is not surprised by trouble, but is confident in God's presence within it. Let this story be an encouragement to your heart. Remember that you are not alone in your boat. When you feel overwhelmed, when fear whispers that you are perishing, remember the one who sleeps in the stern, resting not in indifference, but in perfect, sovereign control. Have the courage to wake him with your honest prayers, to pour out your fears at his feet. Trust that he will rise to meet you, not always by instantly removing the storm, but by giving you his peace in the midst of it, a peace that the world cannot give and the storm cannot take away. If this story of faith, overcoming fear, has touched your heart, we invite you to continue this journey with us. Our community, Walking in Faith, is a place to explore these powerful truths more deeply, to find encouragement, and to be reminded of the unshakable hope we have in Him. Subscribe to our channel and become part of a fellowship of believers who are learning, day by day, to trust the one who commands the storms. Let us walk together, growing in faith and anchoring our souls in the profound and lasting peace that only He can provide.